Good morning, folks. This is David Wethington from the Pennsylvania Department of Community Economic Development, the PA HMIS, or Pennsylvania Homeless Management Information System Administrator. Today we will be going over the Privacy and Security Standards webinar training. We do have the initial training up on the website, and this training will be recorded and will replace and update that training in the future as soon as we are done with this training today. This training will be no more than an hour, and we will take time for questions. But just to go over a couple of things, so privacy and security are very important to the system or environment where personal information is collected, stored, and used. And we hope that the information presented in this training will assist you and your organization to better secure the client information you collect on a daily basis. Here at PA HMIS, we plan to hold this training at least once a year and highly recommend that all agencies send at least one staff member every year, and this training class is also required for all new staff members using HMIS. So just to go over some of the agenda topics today, we're going to define exactly what privacy and security means in both official and hopefully layman's terms, as well as go over a couple of definitions or acronyms that will be used throughout the class. We will also explain who these privacy and security standards applies to, and just a hint that these apply to everyone that collects and uses personal data. We'll first spend some time explaining privacy responsibilities and the 6 separate requirements associated and what you can do on your end to ensure you are more knowledgeable on the subject, which should assist in your compliance. We will then cover the security and the 3 basic categories that security falls under with the responsibilities and duties of the PA HMIS vendor, which is Ecovia Solutions, or otherwise known as ClientTrack, that they oversee, as well as DCED's responsibilities, and which duties all of you need to ensure are in place at your organizations. We'll finish up with a brief conclusion, and then we'll take any questions and answers at the end of the presentation. I also want to point out that this is a recorded live demonstration, and please refrain from clicking any of the share options on your screen if they seem to be present, so that we stick to one screen that is up here. And as well as all attendees are muted upon entry. However, there might be some times when folks do get in and unmute themselves. If a case where you have unmuted yourself, or just to be safe, if you want to make sure that you mute your phones or mute your computer screens or mics during the entire presentation until questions and answers arise, then we'll move on from there. Okay. So privacy versus security. Privacy is the control over the extent, timing, and circumstances of sharing oneself physically, behaviorally, or intellectually with others. Privacy consists of ensuring specific measures are in place when dealing with personal information and includes directives on when it is collected, how that information is used, and how that information is shared with others. And then security means is the means of ensuring that data is kept safe and from corruption, and that accesses to it is suitably controlled. Security is all about access to actual client data, whether that data is electronically based or paper or hard copy based. Some definitions we have here that we'll go over and will be mentioned over and over and over again during the presentation is covered homeless organization, or CHOES, which most of us should already know. However, it's any organization, employees, volunteers, contractors that records, uses, or possesses or processes protected personal information. This is what we commonly refer to within a HMIS as an agency and includes all associated staff. And then you have your personal protected information, otherwise known as PPI. Any information about a homeless client that, 1, identifies a specific individual, 2, can be manipulated so that the identification is possible, 3, can be linked with other available information to identify a specific individual, which includes or can include name, social security number, program entry and exit, zip code or last permanent address, system/program ID, and program type, etc. Privacy and security standards, just your standard application, applies to all agencies and programs that record, use, and process protected personal information, PPI, within PA HMIS. This includes the balance of state continuum of care and any other continuum of cares utilizing the PA HMIS system, homeless service providers, PA HMIS staff, and any employees, volunteers, affiliates, contractors, and associates who have access to the PA HMIS or PA HMIS client information. This also means that any homeless service provider who does not receive HUD funding, such as faith-based organization, or a city, county, or state agency that is accessing the system or client data must also adhere to the privacy and security requirements. Privacy and security applies to all agencies and programs entering data into the PA HMIS, regardless of funding source. Privacy standards. 3 things with privacy standards: protect client information, protect client personal information from unauthorized disclosure, allow for reasonable, responsible data disclosure, and derived from principles of fair information practices. And then the 6 components of privacy: data collection, limitations, data quality, purpose and use limitations, openness, access and correction, and accountability. A couple So we will now go over just the basic tenets of each of these privacy components. A couple of major points that are embedded throughout the privacy components section is having all client data collection procedures and the process for using and sharing this collected client data be explicit, explained, and laid out in the CHO's privacy notice, and that the main points of the privacy notice be displayed in the privacy posting or consumer notice for all clients to view. And these are those 3 that I just read with the six components of privacy. Data collection, limitations, and data quality. Data collection. A CHO may collect PPO only when appropriate to the purpose for which the information is obtained or when required by law. PPI must be collected by fair and lawful means. A CHO must post a sign at each intake desk or comparable location that explains generally the reasons for collecting this information. An example consumer notice will be shown later on in the presentation of how you should use it. It's also posted on the PA HMIS website, where I'll show you at the end of where that's located. And data quality. PPI collected by a CHO must be relevant to the purpose for which it is used and should be accurate, complete, and timely. Purpose and use limitations. A CHO must specify in its privacy notice the purposes for which it collects PPI and must describe all uses and disclosures. A CHO may disclose or use PPI only if the use or disclosure is allowed by this standard and is described in its privacy notice. Uses and disclosures not specified in the privacy notice can be made only with the consent of the individual or when required by law. Openness. A CHO must publish a privacy notice describing its policies and practices for the processing of PPI and provide a copy of its privacy notice to any individual upon request. A CHO must post a sign stating the availability of its privacy notice to any individual who requests a copy. A CHO must also state in its privacy notice that the privacy may be amended at any time and that the amendments may affect information obtained by the CHOs before the date of the change. Access and correction. In the interest of client access and full disclosure to their own PPI, every CHO must allow an individual to inspect and to have a copy of any PPO about the individual. This includes access to any electronic data entered into PA HMIS or hard copy files on the premise. Also, offer to explain any information that the individual may not understand, and consider any request by an individual or correction of inaccurate or incomplete PPI pertaining to the individual. The CHO is not required to remove any information, but may alternatively mark information as inaccurate or incomplete and supplement it with additional information. Accountability. A CHO must establish a procedure for accepting and considering questions or complaints about its privacy and security policies and practices. A CHO must require each member of its staff, including employees, volunteers, affiliates, contractors, and associates, to sign annually or otherwise a confidentiality agreement that acknowledges receipt of a copy of the privacy notice and that pledges to comply with the privacy notice. Additionally, accountability actions that can be undertaken by CHOs but are not required at this time are requiring each staff member to undergo formal training in privacy requirements, as well as establishing a method such as an internal audit or regular reviewing compliance with its privacy policy. CHOs can also designate a chief privacy officer to supervise implementation and oversight of their privacy notice and privacy standards. Furthermore, on accountability, in summary, every CHO that collects, uses, and shares PPI must have a published privacy notice, and it must be maintained and made available to the general public and meet the following: must also comply with other federal, state, and local confidentiality law, recommended to have a history of updates recorded in each published version, and recommended to be posted on the website if applicable. Mind you, we do have ours posted on the PA HMIS website, which I'll show you later. But on the next slide, furthermore on accountability, so this is just an example that we have here of the consumer notice that can be posted. But a privacy posting or consumer notice or sign must be displayed at each intake desk or comparable location that explains reason for the data collection, availability of the CHO's privacy notice, and describing the privacy practices to all clients or consumers that request a copy. Additional information that can be placed on the consumer notice is any additional data sharing disclosures or data collection rules, such as giving notice to all clients that apply for services that by accepting services they have given implied consent to having their data collected and entered into PA HMIS. Note that implied consent for HMIS data collection only covers sharing data within their own organization. Any client data that is shared outside of the servicing CHO or outside a participating network of service providers, which must have a prior agreement or agreements for data sharing in place, must receive specific written consent from that client. So, as shown in the slide, the example of the privacy posting of consumer notice, this can be displayed in your program office. A copy can also be found in the document section of the pennsylvaniacoc.org/PAHMIS website. And please only use this as a guide for your own agency's privacy notice at all intake and service locations. Also, your local COC may have other specific consumer notices or privacy postings related to your COC's coordinated entry system. Security. Now this is the part of the presentation we'll get into the security standards part, or security category of the presentation. So Ecovia Inc., which is otherwise known as Client Track or the software provider, the HMIS vendor, PA HMIS / DCD, and CHOs must apply system security provisions to all the systems where personal protected information is stored, including but not limited to a CHO's networks, desktops, laptops, cell phones, tablets, and/or portable devices, mainframes, and servers. The security has three categories: the system security, software application security, and hard copy security. Most of the requirements in regards to the system security fall to the HMIS vendor and entity that handles the software server, which would be Ecovia and the PA HMIS team. However, some security and software security does need to be performed on and by the CHOs, especially in the form of a hard copy security. In the next slide, we're going to briefly go over the vendor and /PA HMIS security responsibilities, and then we'll spend some time going over your or the CHO's security responsibilities in each of the three categories listed on this slide. Excuse me. Ecovia, in accordance with DCD, adheres to the following standards and is in compliance in the following mandates related to security: virus protection, firewalls, disaster recovery and backup, electronic data transmission, electronic data storage, and system monitoring, as well as disposal. CHO system security. Each CHO that works with PA HMIS must provide users with workstations or computers throughout the agency. Those workstations should have a specific user name and password that allows for Windows access into each machine. These Windows passwords should be non-generic in nature and should be unique to each workstation. Example, do not have each computer log in as username or user and no password, or user and password 1234. Each workstation should be locked or have a timeout mechanism after a period of inactivity, for example 10 to 20 minutes, that places the computer into a password-enabled screensaver stated password protected screensaver state, whereas the username and password must be re-entered in the computer to allow access again. This will prevent users from walking away from a publicly placed computer, the system remaining logged in, and having an unauthorized person come by and potentially access information that should not be. Also to point out, the server does automatically have lockout mechanisms, whereas if you do walk away from the computer, not only will should your computer go into a protected screensaver mode, but the system will log itself out as well as a secure server. Also, all computers that have a almost all computers should have built-in safeguards and features that can enable password-based screensavers after a short period of inactivity, and this small step greatly increased your show's security. Finally, many workstations have Windows applications, i.e. Word or PDF documents and emails that could potentially contain PPI and need to be secured accordingly. A caseworker could be sending an email about a client to an outside agency resource or a medical clinic, and this information needs to be guarded as well as any information that even contains the client's name falls into this PPI category. All CHOs should ensure proper steps are taken to address individual access to such programs and electronic documentation, and not just the computer itself. The most popular avenue to take is, while multiple persons usually use the same workstation, have individual user access, username and passwords, into the same machine where each user has their own email account and documentation folder. CHO software application and security. Each CHO must have an individual username and password that is used to log in and use PA HMIS. When registering with the system and retaining the access with the system user individual, CHO user must have their own unique username and password for their own personal use. The username and password used under the control of PA HMIS and meet all applicable security requirements. Just a reminder, we do give you your own username, and that is based off of your email address. Now, your password should be unique. Written information specifically pertaining to user access, i.e. username and password, may not be stored or displayed in any publicly accessible location. Please do not keep your username and password in a publicly accessible area. Example, a post-it note on your computer or a scrap of paper in your desk drawer. This makes it very easy for other individuals to take your user access and log into the system as yourself. Try to use other methods like keeping the information on your person, like your wallet or your purse. Also, you can even have it stored somewhere on your personal computer in a hard-to-find location. Example would be within your documents folder in an ambiguous name, text, or Word document file. There's also other features that you could use to store your passwords through your portable devices in the form of an app that you can use as well. PA HMIS users must not provide their user access to any other member of their CHO, and shared user access is strictly prohibited within the participation agreement and system user agreement. Under no circumstances should any PA HMIS user give you their personal username and password to any other CHO's user. This includes their supervisor and management team. Sharing of the username is explicitly forbidden, as Each individual user must have their own registration, sign their own system user agreements, and be included under their member agency CHO within the user authorization form. The PA HMIS specifically logs each action in the system by user ID, and if multiple persons are using the same one, if an auditing issue arises, this will cause complications if questions need to be asked. In addition, asking for another user system access puts everyone in an uncomfortable position. Please do not do it. CHO hard copy security. A CHO must secure any paper or other hard copy containing personal protected information that is either generated by or for HMIS, including but not limited to reports, data entry forms, a signed consent form, and signed consent forms. Any hard copy forms used by the CHO or agency, such as a client intake, eligibility determination, service provided forms, as well as a client consent or client privacy forms, must be kept in a secure location and can only be accessible to authorized CHO personnel at all times. Please remember that this also includes any information that is provided by the PA HMIS system as well. There are many ways to get data out of the system and includes system reports that contain PPI. Anything that contains even a client name falls under this heading. This also includes page prints such as client profile directly from the system, and especially the printable client assessments that are made available within the system. Please be aware of when this occurs and that this information is carefully tracked and not left lying around in public view. A CHO must supervise at all times any paper or other hard copy generated by or for HMIS that contains PPI when the hard copy is in a public area. When CHO staff are not present, the information must be secured in an area or areas that are not publicly accessible. I highly recommend keeping your files in a securely locked room or closet that can be closed up when all staff have left for the night or the weekend. Additional CHO security. The following are additional security measures that should be put in place to reduce the physical access to confidential client data. Escort all visitors and clients to ensure that they do not access staff areas. Record storage areas or other areas potentially containing client information, and the CHO will request persons not recognized as staff, visitors, and clients to identify themselves. Implement security measures to prevent unauthorized use of photocopiers, printers, and fax machines by visitors and other unauthorized persons, and create an atmosphere where CHO staff feels comfortable and obligated to report security breaches and misuse of the PA HMIS system. All CHOs should encourage clients to report any breaches in confidentiality that they observe at the CHO or by CHO staff members. In conclusion, privacy is in everyone's hands, and it is all of our responsibilities to ensure clients' personal protected information, PPI, remains confidential, relevant, and only in front of authorized personnel, whether that be internal staff or external partnering organizations. Please ensure all CHOs review their privacy notices and policies with staff on a regular basis. This includes going over security strategies to keep client data electronic and hard copy safe. The security standards presented for CHOs are not difficult to implement and can significantly lower the chances of unauthorized access occurring. If you are not familiar with the specific terms laid out in the training, please present them and pass them along to your organization's IT personnel, and they should not have any issues instituting these policies. Hopefully, if not all, are already in place. For more information, you can go to the PennsylvaniaCOC.org website. I'll come over here to the PennsylvaniaCOC.org website, as you see up here. And under General Agreements, you can find several of your documents, your user agreements, your user authorization forms, your notice of privacy practice, as well as your consumer notice. I'll show those to you right here. So here's notice of privacy practice through HMIS that we have established. As well as your consumer notice example. Sorry about that. My little WebEx sharing icon would not bring me back to that directly. So again, your documents is under your general agreements. You have your intake templates that you will find as well. Any of your guides, and all trainings will be placed under your trainings and recordings under Client Check version 15. Just also to point out that the training done on January 3rd has been posted here, and it's labeled as PA HMIS Data Entry Exit Annual Assessment Training. And by clicking on it, it will take you to a registration page where you can then register and view it so that we can track it as well. And we'll be placing the privacy and security in the same area as well. If you want to take a deeper dive into some of the federal regulations, the proposed rule for HMIS requirements is here at this web address. And that's www.hudexchange.info/resources167. Just to take you there, it'll take you to the proposed rule, which is still proposed and is not finalized. And as soon as it gets finalized, we will do an updated webinar on privacy and security in your data collection and technical standards. Once this rule has been finalized by HUD, yet we do not know, and it is still to be determined. For more questions, you can contact me at this email address and phone number, and you can contact the help desk right here at ra-pahmis@pa.gov, and the phone number is 717-214-5326. At this time, I'm going to pull open the chat functions and see if we have any questions. So, Michelle, to answer to your question, the presentation or slideshow will be posted to the website, the PennsylvaniaCOC.org website, and I'll be sure to send out this information to everybody who registered for this webinar as well, along with the recording and the presentation. Let's see what else we have here. So we have a question here that says, must these notices tell clients exactly who will have access to their information? For example, if a shelter or a church is on the COC HMIS system, would that shelter or church be listed as a potential recipient of the client's information? So you can do it in two ways. One, I would definitely, since coordinated entry is taking off, take a look at the coordinated entry policies and procedure manual related to this, which will go a little bit deeper. But for this notice in specific, it can state that it works with partnering agencies within the continuum or within your region. You can have a separate sheet on the side that lists your partnering agencies, but not potentially that other shelter out within HMIS. They might not specifically have access to their information unless the client consents and goes to that shelter. Now, for purposes of coordinated entry or any type of prioritization wait list or community queue, it is important that they see that their information is going to be going onto some type of community queue because of the first point of access, wherever they might be going, and how it's presented. Their information most likely will be presented on that list so that other rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing providers can pull their information and get a referral to them to provide services to them to provide further information. And when it comes to 211 call centers posting the privacy policy, that will be addressed in a separate training for call centers, as well as in the policies and procedure manual for coordinated entry. So we'll get back to you at a later date on that one. And let me see if there's any Q&A. Nope. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? They could write in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I can attempt to unmute you and go from there.